I was really mad at first, I have to admit. I heard news last night that Donald Trump would be pardoning someone very important and that it wasn't going to be Snowden or Michael Flynn. And I thought, whoa, is Donald Trump going to pardon Julian Assange? Like, who else could it be? And everybody was speculating it could be Julian Assange. Think about how huge that would be. Many Trump supporters were calling for it, cheering for it. Well, the bad news came. Donald Trump pardoned women's suffrage leader Susan B. Anthony. And I said, what? Are you kidding me? You hype up all this? I'm sitting, I'm all night like, wow, man, dude, it would be so amazing. It would be huge, breaking news. I was just sitting there thinking, like, what does this mean? He's gonna be pardoning, and then it was a posthumous, symbolic pardoning of a historical figure. Now, mind you, Susan B. Anthony, I think, was pretty epic. She got charged with illegally voting, refused to pay the fine, and told him to buzz off. And I'm like, that's pretty ballsy. That's pretty rad. So, you know, I think she was a rad historical figure. In fact, most Americans kind of do. We have silver dollars. We have Susan B. Anthony's. We call them that. We named a currency. We put her face on it because she's great. Well, I'll tell you what. I was mad at first, and now I'm laughing. You know why? Donald Trump must be some kind of freaky genius. You know, I can't imagine, I've said this before, that Donald Trump just seems to slip on banana peels and do perfect backflips. Like here's the scenario. Either Trump is constantly just bumbling around, but accidentally making great things happen that work for him, or he knows what he's doing, or at least has people who know what they're doing. To be fair, I was kind of upset. A lot of people were let down when we heard this. And then I saw the news. And now people are somewhat facetiously saying the left is now trying to cancel Susan B. Anthony. And I couldn't believe it. And then I looked at the stories. There's a couple things I noticed in this news that I think Trump knows what he's doing. Listen, remember that scenario, that campaign or whatever, where they said it was okay to be white, and they made those white pieces of paper with bland black letters, and they just put it up places? The goal of that campaign, is my understanding, was to create something relatively innocuous and see how outraged everyone would become, proving that these people are unhinged. It's kind of like what Trump is doing here. Today is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. The last state, I believe it was Tennessee, ratified the 19th Amendment on August 18th, 1920, solidifying women's right to vote. In the next general election, only about 36% of women actually ended up voting, but it's been 100 years. So Trump is commemorating it by pardoning Susan B. Anthony of her crime of illegally voting. And sure enough, they can't help themselves. In one article, there are a couple articles actually like, well, Susan B. Anthony was, she was anti-abortion and she was evangelical. And it's like, they go after the founding fathers, right? Of course they would go after Susan B. Anthony. Other articles can't help but just make it all about Trump, having nothing to do with Susan B. Anthony. So here we go. The AP, in their story, they're like, well, Trump's desperate bid to try and attract female voters. And I'm just like, I'm laughing. Not one of these outlets could just say Donald Trump today posthumously, symbolically pardoned Susan B. Anthony for the crime of illegally voting. Today marks the 100th anniversary. Trump was commemorating it by doing this action. End of story. Not one. They all have to jam in something about Trump being a bigot, about being a sexist, or literally drag Susan B. Anthony. So now I'm laughing. And this is something that's referred to as the Babylon Bee news cycle, that basically, if Trump is for something, the Democrats must oppose it. The Democrats are opposing this, I kid you not. Some blue check personalities are saying things like, Susan B. Anthony wanted to be charged. That was the point. How dare you pardon her? That was the point, right? And Trump pardoning her is agreeing with her. That's the point. He's saying after all this time, she did the right thing. I agree. They're trying to make it negative. So here's the 4D chess. You can operate on the assumption that Donald Trump just keeps walking down the street, slipping on a banana peel, but pulling off a perfect double backflip landing. Boom, superhero landing, fist to the ground. No, come on. Trump does something seemingly innocuous, kind of standard or traditional. Some people are dragging him for this. Many Trump supporters are disappointed. I can respect that. I was pretty upset that he didn't pardon Assange or someone. But then I thought about what he just did. Trump has just said to many Americans, I have done something boring, and the media is screeching about it. You know, not as bad as they've been on many other stories, but the fact that they can't give 3 seconds to the president to just do something, I think you're going to see a lot of Americans going, what? You read this article from the New York Times and they're like, actually, she was a very divisive figure and she was anti-abortion, therefore. And it's like, wait, are you literally dragging? Listen. Donald Trump has tricked the left and the media into disparaging Susan B. Anthony on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. What is going on? These people have lost their minds. Today is the day to commemorate Susan B. Anthony, one of the OG suffragettes who fought for freedom and actually helped us progress as a nation. What are they doing? Donald Trump, with a flick of a pen and some very boring words, has just made one of the stupidest news cycles a reality. And maybe this will wake up a lot of people to say, what? What's going on? If they're lying about this, if they're doing this, what else were they lying about? Tearing down statues, perhaps? The media screeches Confederate statues all day and night. Trump says, no, Grant, Jefferson, Washington. Maybe this will be a big wake-up call for the suburban women that Donald Trump actually is trying to, get to vote for him. That's what the AP says. Let me show you some of these stories. The AP says Trump to pardon women's suffrage leader Susan Anthony. And they just give you the basic, gist of it, saying a controversy swirls over mail-in voting. Because, of course, Trump's move comes amid an outcry over postal service disruptions. Don't care. Just tell me what he did. Comments from Trump. And some of those assembled for a White House event commemorating the 19th Amendment quickly pivoted to an appeal for Trump's reelection. Win, lose, or draw, we have to get it right, Trump said, adding that mail-in voting as opposed to absentee voting leads to ballots cast by pets and the deceased. And I'll be fair and say this. To the AP, if Donald Trump wants to veer off script when he was doing this and talks about other things, then you know what? That's on Trump if they're going to drag him for him doing it. But the AP likes to immediately bring up that Trump is trying to get support from suburban white women. They say his action comes as his support has been eroding among suburban white women in battleground states since his last campaign, in part because of his harsh rhetoric. In recent weeks, Trump has recognized he needs to work to undo some of the damage among pivotal constituency and has stepped up his events aimed at women. His campaign has launched a Women for Trump bus tour, and the president has embraced a law and order message with renewed vigor. They say Anthony was arrested for voting in her hometown of Rochester, New York, and convicted in a widely publicized trial. Although she refused to pay the fine, the authorities declined to take further action. That's kind of epic, dude. Susan B. Anthony was awesome. She was like, I think I have the quote somewhere, but she basically was like, F off, and that's civil disobedience. I'm down for it, We ended up with a lot of changes to this country over the past 100 years, starting with those who are willing to stand up for civil rights and real social justice. And we have liberty has been winning out. The rights of the individual. When they created this country, they didn't get it perfectly, but they had some really, really good ideas that laid the seeds, that planted the seeds of freedom. And people like Susan B. Anthony, people like Frederick Douglass, and many others, Martin Luther King Jr., were watering that seed, and it flourished into a beautiful, beautiful tree. And that's liberty for all individuals. And we continue to strive to do better. And we've done a really, really great job. Probably the best country on the planet. So in honor of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, hats off to you. Congratulations, Susan B. Anthony. What an amazing legacy. But we can't, they can't leave it alone. And so the reason why I bring up the suburban housewife thing is that I think this is a brilliant play by Trump. It may seem innocuous and traditional, but the more Trump does regular things, think about this. What have I complained about? Trump's rhetoric, Trump's personality? You bet. And I said years ago, I was like, you got to understand that plays a serious role in how liberals feel about the guy. And I started to acknowledge, we've got these really bad happenings right now with the riots. There's potential for war. And we've got COVID. And I'm thinking to myself, well, the riots need to be stopped. The rise of this weird far left insanity needs to be stopped. And Donald Trump is the only real choice, it feels like. And there's things I don't like about him, but I thought about it. When was the last time Trump did one of these, insults and mocked and acted like a fool? And he hasn't really been doing that. He's greatly improved. I know a lot of people liked that about him, that he was rough and tumble and would just say, hit him, get out of here. I don't care. This guy's a fat cow or whatever. Trump's been presidential, to say the least. So when I'm looking at the problems facing our country, Trump doing something very kind of boring, I was let down at first. To be honest, I was tweeting out like, what is this? What is going on? Are you kidding me? And then I just saw the reaction and I started laughing. And I was like, Trump got him. Trump is now playing up the role of a regular president, and they're going nuts. I think it's a brilliant strategy. The suburban housewives who know the history and the importance of Susan B. Anthony will now read stories in the New York Times where they say that, like, Susan B. Anthony was an increasingly divisive figure. Wait, it's the 100th anniversary and the New York Times is smearing Susan B. Anthony? Oh, wow. Look at this. Unlike other pardons the president has given, Miss Anthony is not someone whose work Mr. Trump has spoken of either in his campaign or during his presidency. She is also an increasingly divisive figure, adopted by anti-abortion forces and criticized for relegating black suffragists to the sidelines. On Tuesday, Marjorie Dannon-Felser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List, an anti-abortion political group, and Cleta Mitchell, an attorney who represents conservative groups, were in attendance as Mr. Trump made his announcement. He pardoned or granted clemency to a number of people he personally knows, or for people whose cases resonate with him, such as Rod Blagojevich, who is serving a prison term for corruption charges in Illinois. Mr. Trump recently granted clemency to other people. Then they go on to say this. This is amazing. Mr. Trump, who has repeatedly been accused of harassment or assault, and who has often made degrading comments about women, is facing a deep gender gap in his campaign against Mr. Biden. On Tuesday, surrounded by several female supporters, Mr. Trump declared that women dominate the United States and complained the coronavirus has darkened the economic picture for women. But the event on Tuesday did not stay on the topic of women's suffrage for long. The point is, the New York Times couldn't help themselves. If Trump says it, they got to be against it. Look, there's more. Guilty of nothing. Lieutenant Governor Hochul says Susan B. Anthony doesn't need a pardon. Trump can't even agree with them without them getting angry and saying no to Trump. She said, as the highest ranking women elected official in New York, and on behalf of Susan B. Anthony's legacy, we demand Trump rescind his pardon. She was proud of her arrest to draw attention to the cause for women's rights and never paid her fine. Let her rest in peace. Trump is commemorating one of the most prominent historical figures in American history on this day, the 100th anniversary of suffrage. Susan B. Anthony didn't get to live to see her dream, but with her fight, she pulled it off. What happened to the left, man? Donald Trump is saying she was right the whole time. That's what he is saying with the pardon. She stood her ground and defied the law. And finally, 100 years later, the government has capitulated to her. You were right the whole time. And they say, no, take it back. She wanted to be arrested and charged. Yes, to make a point. And now, from the highest office in our country, the president said she was right the whole time. Bravo. I didn't really care about this. I was like, I'm not going to talk about this. Susan B. Anthony, whatever. Trump did his thing. And now I'm seeing this just sheer insanity. I'm going to throw it to Sticks, Axe, and Hammer. Sticks is a smart fella. If you don't follow him on YouTube, you should check him out. He's on Twitter, Sticks666official. He says, Trump's Susan B. Anthony pardon is a double whammy from a strategic standpoint. It brings up the issue of illegal voting, and it nullifies the Democrats' Trump is sexist line. As far as any particular pragmatic meaning, it has none, but perception trumps reality. I saw that from Sticks, and I said, that's actually a really good point. And sure enough, when you look over at ABC News, it absolutely does bring up the fraudulent voting. Think about it. I showed you this in the other articles. They mentioned the same thing at a time of heightened concern about mail-in voting. Trump, he had an opportunity. He took it. I actually think it was kind of smart. Now, I got to be fair. I'm upset. I did want to see Assange get pardoned. I still would. That's just me. It's a complicated issue, but Assange, I believe, as far as I can tell based on the things I've seen, it was acts of journalism. They targeted him, and it's kind of scary what they've been doing to him for like a decade now. So I thought it was going to be Assange. I thought it was going to be epic, and it wasn't. So I'm let down, and I'm not going to let that, being let down, negatively impact my perception of what's actually going on. ABC News says He pardons her, blah, blah, blah. It also comes amid Trump's relentless claims without evidence of widespread fraud if there is universal mail-in voting in November's election and mounting concern over U.S. Postal Service disruptions. Trump is keeping the conversation on mail-in voting and voting fraud. Sticks is right, absolutely right. Now, of course, there are still other outlets that are kind of hilariously... Look, here we go. They say Trump's pardon induced a backlash from critics who said defiance of a corrupt law was Anthony's point, and the president has no business pardoning her. So I did mention this. But look at this. She is also regarded as a hero by some evangelical anti-abortion campaigners, a stance which many pro-choice campaigners contest. Members of the Susan B. Anthony list, an anti-abortion group, were at the White House on Tuesday. Though Anthony never publicly spoke for or against abortion, some have attributed to her anti-abortion writing from a writer who went by the letter A. Experts deemed Anthony's connection to the writing dubious at best. Whatever. The point is, they couldn't help but drag Susan B. Anthony, one of the original OGs, for which we have quite literally the Susan B. Anthony silver dollar, man. It's not a real silver dollar, but people call them, silver dollars or whatever. It's just it means a coin that is worth $1. And they give these out. I don't know if they still do, but they used to. And for the Chicago train line, when you put money in, it would give you Susan B. Anthony coins worth $1. We put the woman literally on our currency. That's how much we revere her. Now, I'll be fair. Look, them coming out and criticizing her is relatively minor. But to see even a negative word on this day is just insanity. Can you imagine what's going to happen when, Trump comes out and he says Martin Luther King Jr. was great, and they're like, actually, Martin Luther King Jr. was... I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I want to show you some humorous points. This one was posted to the Donald.win, which is the big Donald Trump forum. A guide to our stupid news cycle. This breaks down from the Babylon Bee exactly what we're seeing. Trump takes stance on a thing. The post office is slow. War is bad. HCQ looks promising. Democrats forced to take opposite stance. The post office is incredible. War is good. I'd rather die than... I kid you not. I was talking to a long-standing progressive friend of mine, and I said, Donald Trump is trying to withdraw our troops from the Middle East. Would you support that? And they said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? Weren't you out complaining about this with every other liberal 5-6 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 with Obama? I don't know. I actually had a friend tell me, I read this really interesting article on why we're in Afghanistan. It really makes sense. And I'm like, who's the article by? And it was a neocon. And I'm like, what has happened to you? You hate Trump so much? Yes, let's carry on. War is good, they say. Unhinged conspiracy theories form. Trump is working with big hydroxy to nuke mailbox and cause apocalyptic levels of peace. It's true. Unhinged conspiracies. Are you seeing the people post the photos of mailboxes at dumpster yards? They're just old, destroyed, decrepit mailboxes. And they're like, what is happening? Trump is getting rid of our mailboxes. Vladimir Putin has ordered him to do it. Yep. False. Theories all debunked and absolutely no lessons are learned. Which brings me now to yes, how the Babylon Bee knows they can crank out a home run every minute at any time, whenever. Brilliant Trump puts himself on all postage stamps, forcing Democrats to push for abolishing USPS. One of my favorites on the Babylon Bee is ingenious move. Donald Trump comes out in support of impeachment, forcing Democrats to oppose. Or one of the more common jokes is if Trump came out in favor of oxygen, Democrats would hold their breaths, their breaths, whatever. Because that's how the news works, man. Now, I will wrap this up by saying, in all seriousness, I'm let down. I think it's funny. It's funny that Trump knows how to play this game. And the important takeaway from all of this is that there's going to be some suburban housewives who are going to be sitting there reading the paper and see some disparaging remark about Susan B. Anthony and go, huh? What? Then there's going to be someone saying, why are you bringing up these negative things about Susan B. Anthony? Why is it bad that Trump pardoned her, agreeing with her? Why is everything Donald Trump does wrong? Come on, man. And they have to say something, but, so I think that's a great political point for the president. But what about actual pardons? Well, I'm going to throw it back to the fellers over at the Donald.win who bring up Initially, 14 hours ago, Trump says he will pardon someone very, very important on Tuesday. Assange, let's go, free the gray beard. Julian Assange has been a political prisoner. Fingers crossed for Assange. If it's Assange, I expect people will board planes because the pain is here. Justice demands it. Justice demands it. Well, I got bad news for y'all. The latest post. Trump pardoned not Assange, but Susan B. Anthony. Sorry, boys. People said, meh. Don't always get your hopes up for these types of announcements. This one really seems useless and pandering. His base is going to say the same thing. Meh. The other side is going to say pandering. What good does this really do? Free Assange. It forced me to look up why she was being pardoned. For what? Anthony, who died in 1906, had been arrested in 1872 for violating laws that had permitted only men to vote. Those laws were just, haha, JK. Yeah, it's a bummer that it wasn't Assange, in my opinion. I think that there are many people Trump could pardon. And I guess I really do feel, Trump talked about pardoning Snowden. He was very, very critical of Snowden early on, but he changed his tune. And I think it's obvious. Glenn Greenwald brought it up. Donald Trump initially was like, nah, Snowden leaked secrets. Then Trump became the target of members of the intelligence community abusing their power to go after him. And then he was like, well, I'm glad Snowden did it. And so now he may very well pardon Snowden. So you know what? I'll tell you this. Will Biden? No, of course not. Will Biden bolster our troops in foreign countries and help provoke war? Probably. Will he likely to fall asleep, give the reins to Kamala Harris? That's probable too. Will Joe Biden do anything substantive, or will he recreate the establishment policies that left us where we were for the Obama years? Drone strikes, war, generally just expansion of the surveillance state, FISA abuse, Espionage Act charges. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not voting for that guy. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that the Donald Trump guy will get our troops out of the Middle East, that he'll pardon Snowden and Assange, and he'll do things that people in this country actually care about instead of pandering to insane mobs. Today, Donald Trump did something relatively innocuous, in my opinion, that let me down, and mostly I don't care. But to see the reaction from people to criticize him over this, I'm just ready to face palm. 4D chess move, or Trump slipping once again on a banana peel and landing a perfect backflip. If everything Trump does is wrong, they must be lying. Because I'll tell you this, Trump does many good things. Trump doesn't always do the best things. That's normal. And that I can understand and grasp. But whatever it is the Democrats say, everything is wrong. I'm sick of it. And you know what? Listen, I said this before. There are Trump supporters and there are anti-establishment. And I hate more than anything the fact that no matter what he does, it's wrong. So you know what? I'm sick of it. If the dude bought a pizza for a homeless guy, they'd say, but he couldn't get him a salad or something healthy? What is wrong with the man? Trump could run into a burning building and singed and burned, carry out a box of puppies that he saved. And they would say, yeah, but why was he in the fire? Did he start it? How dare Trump do this? What about cat lovers? They would just be unhinged, and no matter what he does, it's wrong. They would say, how reckless of a president to risk his life over puppies. He's the president of the United States. He must be safe. What would happen if he got hurt? How reckless. Trump could dive off the side, with like a rope from an exploding, building glass, and then swing down and save a young child falling 100 stories, swing back and land perfectly, and they would somehow find a way to make it bad. We live in interesting times, to say the least. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net, where I will be talking about the DNC, which is going to be fun, and I will see you then. Thanks for hanging out.